Yes, you do.
Oh, AI. Okay, thank you.
All right, we're going to get started this morning with an invocation led by Pastor Ted Inman, who serves as assistant pastor at Southwest Baptist Church, but is also a volunteer chaplain for our Oklahoma City Police Department. That will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilwoman Barbara Young. Please stand.
Our Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for your great love for us. You sent your Son to die on the cross for us. We want to stop and say thank you for that and all you do for us. And I do pray that you'd bless and give great wisdom to these who are serving our city in this way today as they make decisions that will benefit all of us, all the citizens of Oklahoma City. Give them wisdom and grace and help them. And we're going to pray and ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor and Councilwoman. All right, I call this meeting of the City Council to order. We have no items on item 3, Office of the Mayor, which brings us to item 4, items from Council. I'm told that, Councilman Carter, you may wish to strike this item and bring it back at a later time. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
So this awkwardly falls before the request for uncontested continuances, so I think we need to take a vote to strike the item, if that's okay. So we would need you to make that motion.
I move.
Your Honor, may I vote verbally?
Yes, of course, yes. We have a motion and a second to strike item 4A. How do you wish to vote, Councilman Greenwell?
Yes.
Okay. Passes unanimously. All right, item 5, City Manager reports. Mr. City Manager.
I do not have any reports today. We just have claims and payroll on.
Okay, which you can reference on our website, okc.gov. Item 6, Journal of Council Proceedings. We have items A and B we can take with one motion. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Councilman Greenwell, how do you wish to vote?
Yes, please.
Okay. Councilman Stonecipher, have you voted yet? No worries. Passes unanimously. All right. Now item 7, request for uncontested continuances. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. We have several on today. Starting on page 5 on the consent docket, item 9AF. This item will be deferred to January 18th. Staff just needed more time to work on this. Item 11H1 on page 11, unsecured structures. All of these items will be stricken. Item A, 728 Catherine Place. The owner is secured. Item B, 9615 North Walker Avenue. The owner is secured. Item C, 1345 Northwest 3rd Street to re-notify for additional structures. And then item J, 2944 Northwest 66th Street, the owner is secured. And then on item 11I1, abandoned buildings, this item will be stricken from the agenda. 9615, item A, 9615 North Walker Avenue, the owner is secured. And that's all the items I have.
Okay. Item 8A is a revocable right-of-way use permit with the OKC Martin Luther King Jr. Coalition to hold the Martin Luther King Jr. Holiday Parade. Has no one signed up? Oh, please come forward.
How y'all doing?
Great.
I'm William Jones. I'm the event coordinator for Martin Luther King Parade, and we're here to ask your approval for our parade that's going to happen on January the 17th.
Great. Councilwoman Hammond is not here. Councilwoman Nice, would you like to speak to this or make a motion?
I'm not going to ask why I'm asked to do that, but I'm happy to do it. I know we're going to have a great event on this day.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
excited about the day of now reconvening. I know last year we had to do it virtually, so this year we'll be back in person, and we'll be careful again and safe in ensuring that we're celebrating the legacy and honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So with that, I'll move for approval.
All right, we've got a motion, and we'll do this virtually. Is it? There we go. Now, the motion was by, yeah. Okay. Well, cast your votes. Passes unanimously.
Thank you so very much. I hope we get to see all of you there.
For sure.
God bless.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to recess the council meeting and convene as the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority, where we have items A through D we could take with one motion. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We'll adjourn OCMFA and convene as the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority, where we have items A through D we can take with one motion. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Now we'll adjourn OCPPA and reconvene as the council, where we find ourselves on the consent docket. We have no scheduled presentations, but is there anything this is item 9 on page 2 of your printed agenda. Is there anything that a council member wishes to pull out for a separate vote or just a separate comment or question?
Yes, please. Item 9AS. Comment and vote.
Okay. S is in Sam, is that what you said?
Yes,
AS?
please.
Okay. Got it?
Item AN as in Nancy.
Okay.
And AM as in Mary.
Okay.
And while we're on it, might as well do AK.
Okay. Okay, anything else? Hearing none, we'll take them in. Oh,
I'm sorry, Mayor, I wanted to point out one item on, Councilman Stonecipher had pointed out an error on item AZ. And it's just in the memo, but in the memo at the end of it, it's for the Carnegie Center, the project's for the Carnegie Center. At the end of it, it references the Ambassador Hotel, and it should say Carnegie Center. So it doesn't change anything on the item, but on the memo,
Okay.
the references all through the document are for Carnegie Center. At the bottom there, bottom paragraph, it says Ambassador Hotel, and should say Carnegie Center.
the danger of cutting and pasting.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we're going to take them in order, which means that we will start with item AK. Councilwoman Nice.
Yes, item AK it actually coincides with item AM in some aspects. So I know as we talk about the professional services agreement with our Adventure District and those improvements, this AM, I just wanted to mention both of those because clearly with AK, we're looking at better improvements, wayfinding, all the things that we've talked about for the Adventure District. So this is going to help us with maintenance and all of the things that we've been wanting to do as far as Adventure District is concerned to better promote and beautify that area. And in relation to AM, this is also in Adventure District, and this is for the Softball Hall of Fame Bridge. And I understand we are approving the contract and the bonds for that to be constructed. And for those who have not been in the area of the Softball Hall of Fame during the softball event, this is going to be a great thing that we are bringing to the area, as well as beautification and connection, not only for Remington Park, but for the Softball Hall of Fame. So being able to bridge those two places and also have safety for our pedestrians as they're walking in this same area is something that we're all looking forward to and excited about. And this is, again, going back to AK, something that can be promoted through Adventure District. So I wanted to make mention of that. And if you don't mind, I'll just switch on to AN while I have the opportunity. As we're talking about this adoption resolution extending the time to award the contract, I did have a conversation with the Director of Parks and our Assistant City Manager about this Greenway Trail. And my concern is with us being able to use, and I know I've already had these conversations, but I'm bringing this to the public attention to make sure this is on public record, that we have discussed also the lighting on Katy Trail in relation to us being able to approve this Greenway Trail. And my ask was that if this is going to happen, that the Katy Trail also gets the lighting that it needs so we can continue the process there and have what has been brought to our attention from our Trails advisory group as far as some of the pedestrians and people who frequent that particular trail. So I wanted to bring that to the public attention and record because that was my ask in relation to this Greenway Trail being able to be constructed and being approved for this contract and award. So I did want to make sure that is coming. I do understand in the next meeting or two, we will see that on our agenda as far as the Katy Trail for the lights being fixed. And I expect to see that in the next meeting or two.
Yeah, I'll have to talk with Melinda. I know they were looking at the funding sources that they might have for that and what we might be able to do, so I'll find out. Right.
Yes, it was supposed to be the impact fees for the trails to help fund that particular effort. But again, I wanted to make sure that it said multiple times that for one to get done, we wanted to ensure that the other also gets completed. Thank you.
Okay, and item AS, Councilman Stonecipher?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. This is item 9AS is a project agreement for the installation of bicycle facilities. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 locations that are listed. It's estimated that the construction is scheduled to begin summer of 2022 and be completed by fall of 2023. BR 0004, which is EK Gaylord Boulevard, I have some concerns with the project there because of the length of the time of the construction. And so I'd like to defer this for 2 weeks so I could talk to Heather Scott at Continental, David Harlow at Bank First, and possibly Mr. Rainbolt and Mr. Ham to let them know about this project and see how it may affect their workforce coming and going to work, and others that come and go to work down EK Boulevard, because we've had problems in the past and they're very recent problems. And so I just want to have a little better understanding before we move forward with this. So I'm going to move to defer it for 2 weeks.
Okay.
Councilman, may I ask, in talking with those individuals, what you hope to achieve?
I park in the Hefner parking garage, and so if there's a problem, like when traffic backs up to the 5th floor and people can't get out, I'm usually the first person called. And if there's going to be problems where it makes it hard for ingress and egress into the parking garage or other areas, I want to be able to explain that to two of the largest employers in downtown Oklahoma City and make sure they're comfortable with what we're doing.
I appreciate that clarification. Moreover, how do you feel about bike infrastructure generally on EK Gaylord?
I think it's a major arterial for people coming from South Oklahoma City coming to work and leaving, and also those that get on I-40 and go east and west. And so I have concerns, and I want to visit with the stakeholders that employ a lot of people on and around EK Gaylord and get their thoughts and ideas before we move forward. And I'm just asking for a 2-week deferral.
I understand. How do you feel about the employees who would like to, in fact, use EK Gaylord with bike as transportation?
If it's going to cause more major traffic disruptions, I have great concerns about it because like I said, there have been numerous times in 2021 that we've had traffic back up to the 5th floor of the parking garage, especially around the 4:30 to 5:30 time period.
Is it that your concern is specifically the time period for construction, or are you concerned just about the presence of bike infrastructure on Gaylord, period?
I think what I'm concerned about is I want to make sure that our principal employers on EK Gaylord or around EK Gaylord are aware of what's going on and make sure they're comfortable with it. And not only from a construction standpoint, but from the standpoint of ingress and egress for their employees to get to work and go home from work.
Okay. I'll just say for the record, I appreciate any outreach, of course, to stakeholders surrounding a particular project. I worry deeply the idea that we would, because remember, right, the goal with improving, our pedestrian facilities and our bike facilities is to ensure our city offers multiple modes of access in terms of transportation by foot, by bike, by car, by bus, by streetcar, by bus rapid transit. I don't think I'm wrong in that, right?
No.
My worry is that for some people, they don't see that all of the above approach to transportation. They see only the automobile. And that's not a knock against the automobile. I drove an automobile here today. I have a car, I have a bike, I have my feet, a bus right down the street from me in bus rapid transit. But not everyone agrees with that. And frequently, there's a pushback to bike infrastructure. And that's my worry with what a deferral here. I hope the deferral is more to make sure we are coordinating the construction part of this so that, to your point, our workers are able to access employment during that time period. My worry is that, your words aren't providing me comfort, I'm afraid to say. My worry is that we're prioritizing a car and people who use cars to just get to those specific places. We're not even talking about the people who might be biking who live around Automobile Alley, Mesta Park, downtown, who might want to use Gaylord to get to a movie at Harkins or to get to Scissortail Park. Those employment centers are not the only stakeholders, is what I'm saying. Are you following me on this?
Yes, yes.
So that would be my concern with this council and city manager, is that I don't want to see stakeholders who might just be thinking about the car dictate the direction of this important public infrastructure.
Well, we're friends. Let me be very candid. I am concerned about both, not just the construction, but when I have people complaining that they're getting home from work 45 minutes late, that's a concern that I need to be aware of and to think about. And this may not have any problem whatsoever. There's just no drawing, there's no plan, there's nothing to look at today. And so I'm just asking for 2 weeks, and I'll be more than happy to call you after I look at it and tell you what my thoughts are.
I appreciate that. And would it be possible during your discussions for someone to be able to share with our councilman if there are any renderings, any things that he might be able to show the stakeholders so that we can alleviate any possible concerns?
Yeah. And actually on this section on Gaylord, it's actually behind the curb. This is one that we have, and that's the one you said is a cycle track. It's both directions and it's on the back side of the curb, so it won't, just go ahead and come on up, Eric, you can come on up. That it won't impact traffic. So in this part of it, because of the amount of traffic that's going through there, we had that opportunity to take it off of the street, but it still provides for the progress, for people to be able to use that as bike or pedestrian, to be able to use that lane.
I appreciate that clarification. I forgot that this was one of the places we're going to be experimenting with that cycle track. Eric, would you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, Eric Winger, Public Works Director, Oklahoma City. So the plans are not 100% complete, which is why we're not able to prepare those today. The item today was just for the funding agreement with ODOT. This is an ACOG partially funded project, so this was just to secure the funding today. The intent was to actually bring the plans back to the council for approval before ODOT constructed those, but we'll do that early so that there's no questions as we prepare that. But yes, on EK Gaylord, there has been a lot of conversation about traffic. There's been a lot of questions about ingress and egress from the parking garages and from some of the employers, and so we are looking at a cycle track. And for those that are not necessarily familiar with cycle track, it's a bidirectional bike lane, typically located on one side of the street. It can be either on street or it can be off street. And so in this condition, we're actually looking at an off street cycle track that be located behind the curb on EK Gaylord, next to the railroad tracks that are there. But again, we'll bring those plans back. I'll make sure that we get the council updated so that there's not any questions as we move forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Winger. Thank you, City Manager. Thank you, Councilman, for entertaining my questions.
Excuse me, if this is for, just for funding, then do we still need to entertain a motion to defer? I'm curious why we need to entertain a motion to continue to defer it if this has nothing to do with anything you just talked about.
I want to talk to some people that I've already articulated the people I want to talk to before we move forward in any form or fashion on this.
It sounds like there's still plenty of time to do that with us being able to move forward with the funding. And that's just from the explanation that I'm hearing from the folks who have been involved in this conversation. Am I wrong?
Well, we have a motion and a second on the table, so we might as well, at this point, cast a vote, I think. So let's call the vote. Passes 6-2. Item is deferred 2 weeks to our next meeting. All right, that concludes the items that anybody had called out on the consent docket, so we could take a motion to adopt it. Got a motion and a second. This is to adopt the consent docket, save the item previously deferred and another one that was also deferred. Cast your votes. Motion and a second. Passes unanimously. Brings us to the concurrence docket. There's no scheduled presentations here, so we could take...
I'd like to mention item N. I'd like to discuss item N before we continue with the vote.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Thank you. As we talk about, and we have had this in front of our purview for quite a few different times, and the affordable housing units, I want to continue to mention the fact that this agreement, even with the conversations that we've had with the Alliance, despite them wanting to help and assist in the prior being able to fund the whole, as far as the conversation concerned, generators for this whole project. Some feel that it didn't need half of this development to be funded, when in fact I say no to that because of infrastructure issues in this particular area of our community, and the issues that we've had prior to in other senior developments where we had a senior facility without power for over 2 weeks and displaced seniors. I am happy to see that our city did say yes to this. However, I would like to see us not stop at these types of situations. And as quick as we were able to say yes to this, I want us to be able to say yes to developments from the actual community of folks that look like the community as well. So we can move forward with the vote.
Okay. All right. Well, if there's no other discussion of items on the concurrence docket, then we can take a motion to approve them all, A through P. We've got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, item 11, items requiring separate votes. Item 11A is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval to close a 2-mile north-south portion of Douglas Boulevard between Southeast 74th and Southeast 44th, et cetera. This obviously relates to the expansion of Tinker Air Force Base. Councilman Stump.
Thank you, Mayor. I know we've had at least one sign up to speak.
Yes,
Just one?
that appears to be correct, yes.
Okay. Before you come up, I'm going to ask Eric Winger to come up and talk to us a little bit about where we are in plans in terms of changes to Post or 44th or anything like that.
Thank you, Councilman. As we consider the item today, there are several comments that I'll just share, and a lot of these are actually included in the staff report that actually went to the Planning Commission previously. But as we get ready to prepare for the potential closure of Douglas Avenue, there are some improvements that are going to be necessary in the area. As we look at the information that was provided as a part of the application and is also part of a traffic study that was included with the application, we found that it was not comprehensive enough for city staff to fully evaluate all of the needs. But we do see some short-term projects that are going to be necessary for the immediate impact. A couple of other things that we're aware is that the road closure is not imminent. It is not actually planned to be fully closed until late 2023. So we do have some time to develop the final study and the final plans for any of the improvements. But what we're looking at today with the closure of Douglas, which predominantly serves Tinker Air Force Base, but also other commuters in the area, is a partial widening of Post Road that would extend from Southeast 44th to Southeast 74th. And this is going to prepare for a detour, a permanent detour route to move those commuters that are not going to the base, to move them around the base if they're moving through the area. We're also looking at partial widenings that might include some shouldering, some resurfacing of the streets of Southeast 44th and also Southeast 74th. We're also looking at intersection improvements with the likely inclusion of signalized intersections on Post Road, again, with possibly additional turn lanes and some other improvements at Southeast 44th, Southeast 59th, and Southeast 74th. But we're anticipating that there may be some future improvements that are also needed in the area as we better understand how traffic reroutes following the closure. So we don't have all the information today. We are prepared to move forward on a number of these projects. We did have a listed bond project on Douglas Boulevard for a resurfacing, so there are some funds available through the bond, but not sufficient to fully fund the project. Our current estimate of the improvements that I just discussed that include the intersections, the partial widening of Post, and the partial resurfacing and shouldering of 44th and 74th is approximately $14.2 million. So we will be working actively to identify those funds for those projects moving forward to support the council's decision today.
And I'll note too that we did make a request for state ARPA funding for this project that would include addressing any needed changes in water lines, relocation of water lines, as well as addressing the redirecting of traffic. And so we've got a request in. We've also got it on our list of potential ARPA projects, but that's one that we have included with a request to the state.
So I'd be happy to answer any other questions or provide any additional information to the council.
I think I'm good right now. Can we go ahead and,
Sure. Shirley Green. Shirley, if you wouldn't mind stating your name and address.
My name is Shirley Green. I live at 4813 South Oakwood Lane, Oklahoma City, 73150, and I live right off of 44th Street. I'm concerned about the traffic, even though he says there's going to be things taken care of. I also live right next to a field that was owned by Mr. Symes. I don't know if he still owns it or not, but they have dug up clay dirt for Tinker, and now they're dumping cement slabs and anything else that they can carry off of Tinker to dump over there. I'm worried about my well and the area around me where it's going to degrade the property, my value of my property. And I'm living in dust right now because of all the trucks coming in and them digging up dirt and everything else. There is no barriers or anything to stop all the dust and the dirt from flying south to north. That's all I have to say. I haven't heard anything about it. I got the letter after the council meeting last time, so I wanted to make sure I was here so that you could hear my, not really complaints, my concerns. And that's basically all that I have to say. Thank you.
thank you, Shirley. Has anyone else signed up to speak on the item? I'm just not aware that there was some dumping going on of material out there. So that's something I'm going to look at separately to, let me look into it,
They're just pulling everything that they're tearing up at Tinker
back over.
to this property,
Okay.
and there's just cement everywhere. You couldn't use it for anything else.
Great. I will look into that separately and follow up with you. Thank you, Shirley.
Councilman,
Uh-huh.
as you learn more, you know I'm a Midwest City boy, so Douglas has been an exit for me for many years. Would you mind just updating at least me, but maybe let us, the council, know what you learned?
Yeah,
Thank
sure,
you.
absolutely.
Appreciate you, buddy.
Anyone have any other questions or comments on this? I mean, this is the state's biggest single-site employer. Doing this takes care of some concerns that they've had for many, many years where they're dragging bombers back and forth across Douglas, which is a public street. And this will allow them to ease those security concerns somewhat, but also allows for some expansion over there, which in terms means additional quality jobs for our city. So I think it's very important that we move forward with this. I've been able to look at some kind of preliminary designs on gates, and it looks like the way that they're configuring those gates will greatly help ensure that we don't have traffic backing up on 44th or backing up on 74th. So I was really glad to see that. But if there's no further questions, I would go ahead and move for its approval.
Okay, and I certainly echo your comments about the importance of Tinker to our community, and we always want to show our support, and this is a way to do it. We've got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, item 11B and C are two items relating to the streetcar. This was presented on a couple of meetings ago. Item B is an ordinance on final hearing relating to motor vehicle and traffic, amending Chapter 32 of our code. We've had 3 meetings on this. What would the council like to do with the ordinance? We can approve it today if the council so desires. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. And then item C is similarly related to the streetcar and was presented a couple meetings ago. This is an ordinance on final hearing related to general schedule of fees, specifically a fee for towing of motor vehicles. Looks like we're pulling up the motion and second, possibly. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, 11D1 and 2 are related, as well as E. This is a resolution, item D2 is a resolution adopting and confirming an assessment role for the Adventure District Business Improvement District. And Amy, has anyone signed up to speak under the public hearing found at 11D1?
No, they haven't.
Okay, well, we'll close that public hearing. I understand we've already had a presentation on this. What does the council wish to do with item 11D2, the resolution? Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 11E is an ordinance on final hearing adopting and setting the assessment role for the Adventure District Business Improvement District. We could take a motion on this as well. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 11F is an ordinance to be introduced and set for public hearing on January 18th and final consideration on February 1st relating to animals, amending Chapter 8 of the Oklahoma City Municipal Code, etc. Being the first meeting, today we'll have a presentation about it.
Yes, sir. Orville Jones with the Municipal Counselor's Office is here to speak to us on these changes, and so I'll let Orville explain them.
Thank you. The purpose of this ordinance, which is being introduced today, is to harmonize the code provisions that deal with search and seizure and animal welfare cases with more recent constitutional cases of the United States Supreme Court explaining what the Fourth Amendment does and doesn't do. And so the specific things that we're asking to do is to eliminate what are more or less irrelevant distinctions between fences and no fences. Private property is private property. There are exceptions to when a private property doesn't require a warrant, but in most cases, unless there's a consent of the owner or an emergency, a warrant would be required to go into private property for any purpose, and certainly for a criminal purpose to find out if a crime has been committed. So we're asking that the City Council consider these amendments to bring these provisions in line with the constitutional and statutory provisions that prevail.
So am I hearing this right? One would need a warrant to go onto someone's private property in the event of some sort of
I missed the first part of that. Could you-
It's okay. Just want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. One would need a warrant in order to enter a resident's private property in the event that there was some sort of animal welfare call. Is that correct?
This is related only to animal welfare cases. And generally, we'll find that somebody's claiming an animal is being abused or an animal itself is dangerous. And so when we go to do a search, our judges have interpreted the way this ordinance is written in such a way that if nobody refuses entrance, then we can't go onto the property. But the fact is, you can go into property with consent, and if nobody's there to consent, you have to get a warrant. And so we're trying to clarify this. What we need is bright line rules that are just inside the constitutional limits. We're not trying to push the boundary right up to the wall. We're trying to make it very simple and clear for animal welfare officers to know when they do need to ask for a warrant and when they have authority to go on property. So that's what this is intended to do.
So again, just to clarify.
The short answer is yes.
Thank you, Katy.
I am having a communication issue with that. I'm sorry. That's okay. Thank you.
Okay. So we can introduce this today for consideration at our next two meetings. Does the council wish to do so? Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, item 11G is the public hearing regarding the dilapidated structures here listed, and we do have someone who has signed up to speak regarding 11G 1A, and this will also pertain to 11H 1G. Dr. Robert Phillips? Dr. Robert Phillips, please feel free to come forward to the microphone at the podium here. So this relates to 2701 Northeast 21st Street, AKA 2633 Northeast 21st Street. This item was deferred from November 23rd and December 7th. Dr. Phillips?
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me today. The building, which is the Bryant Center, it's probably one of the most important buildings that was in the black community. The place where we all met when I was at Langston and OU to have the party, etc. But anyway, fortunately for me, I wanted to preserve that building, so when I retired from the military, I bought it, and quite a few other properties around it. So we've been having trouble since they just started to do the circle. Because they use my property as the detour road. 21st Street was a street that was you couldn't go through, and because at the end of the block is where I bought Pete Gooder's Buick from 63rd in May, and I was going to put a rec center for the children back there. So then they decided to open up the 21st Street as a street. It wasn't a street at all. There was a parking lot. But they promised me that, when I said Dade City, that it would be returned to me at the end once the throughway on 23rd was completed. So I went along with that. But when the project was completed, they decided to cut my gates down and make it a third street. And so when they did that, then everybody got access to it. I had put in 2 transformers, had electric lighting and so forth. Spring Lake Division, the police came and said thanks because but the crime had stopped in that area. But what happened later is when they decided not to close it down, which was a dead-end street, people started dumping there. But they couldn't, even while they were putting a new road in, they were still dumping.
30 seconds remaining.
Oh, okay. But anyway, what I need, I would like for that to be called a, what is that? A property that's extremely important, and I forgot the name of it. But anyway, Michael, my nephew, he'll address that for me right quick.
Good morning, Council and Mayor. With regards to the facility being unsecured and considered dilapidated, the property owner, Dr. Phillips, on several occasions have addressed those issues that have been brought to his attention. As recent as the second deferment, the building had been secured, more work done. Unfortunately, vagrants have entered this facility again. So the plan is to now, again, at the expense of Dr. Phillips, is to put concrete blocks to block the two entrances that have been penetrated again. I can assure you that this facility has been addressed on numerous occasions as far as the sight line, tree line has been taken down, so there's a clear vision. However, to his point, when 21st Street was opened up, which once upon a time was a dead end, it created more of an opportunity for individuals to come into that area and was an invitation actually for dumping. So there's been an ongoing struggle with keeping that facility or that area cleaned at the expense, but to our avail, we've done a great job at doing that. So with respect to today, we will be asking, if possible, another opportunity for this matter to be deferred again, which gives us an opportunity to now put concrete blocks in the two entrances. That should enable this building to be secured unless individuals decide to take a ladder and scale the wall. But this building does not have any combustibles. It's a concrete structure foundation, concrete brick walls. So at this point, we're going to be required to just go in there and move what the vagrants have placed inside the building and place up concrete blocks, if you will.
Okay, so this
Starting
item,
that right after this meeting is over, I'm meeting with them at the site at that time.
okay. So this location is in Ward 7. Councilwoman Nice, do you want to speak to this?
Yes, I do want to work through how we can figure out, one, the historic preservation that Dr. Phillips was discussing for the Bryant Center, and it sounds like you are willing to do that. So I would like for us to work through that process. And two, I have been actually talking with Dr. Phillips about this particular property since I've been elected, just in different ways of how he can work through getting that property the way he wanted to restore it in the beginning. And clearly, with the years and things that have happened within the last couple of years, that has made it extremely more difficult to do in a more timely manner. So I do want to see how we can work through this process of securing and working through how we can get it off of the dilapidated list. I know the main source is the secured, as far as making sure it's secured, and the dumping part is really a problem. And I understand we do need some more lighting in this particular area because of some of that lighting being stripped and removed and stolen, clearly, you know, as far as the necessities for to cause vagrants not to be in the area or folks
Is that
to
on
be in
street
the area.
lights?
Yes.
Okay. We can check with OG&E on that.
Yes, so we'll start looking at that part as well. But I'm going to ask if we continue to, one, let's at least every week, let's stay updated with our development services, if you don't mind, please. And Mr. Chad, if you'll help me to make sure we have that continued communication, not to say it hasn't happened, because I know it has with your family, especially with your daughters who are out of state who have to help you as well. So I'm going to ask that we defer this for, I'm going to say 2 months, so we can work through this process. And if we can, please, let's work through just getting the secured part initially as soon as possible, so we can get this taken care of, at least for that part. And if we'll work on that lighting infrastructure that we need to look at, Mr. City Manager, that will help me, and we'll start with the process of at least doing the research so we can see how we can claim this property as a historic preservation area as far as the building itself. And I'm going to move for us to defer that in the time manner that I said.
So Amy is suggesting March 1st.
March 1st is perfect.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second to defer item G1A to March 1st, and then we'll do this again in a moment when we get to H. So we've got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay. And we'll handle the deferral of this companion item here in just a second. Okay, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. No one else has signed up to speak on the public hearing for item G, so we'll proceed to G2, which is a resolution declaring structures are dilapidated. At this point, we're only left with G1B. So if there's a motion, we can handle that. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Okay, how do you wish to vote? Okay. Passes unanimously. That brings us to H1, the public hearing regarding the unsecured structures here listed, except for those struck at the beginning of the meeting. And Councilwoman Nice, I presume you would like to move to defer
Item G.
11H1G.
Item G, please,
Yeah,
for 2
yeah,
months. Thank you.
To March 1st. All right, we have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Councilwoman Young, are you back in? Okay. Passes unanimously. Amy, has anyone else signed up to speak on this hearing?
Mayor, can I get some information on item E, please?
7108 Northwest 14th.
So this is an apartment complex that we've been having an issue with for quite some time. And kind of going back and forth, and they changed owners, and we had to restart the process.
Right.
And I know the health department's gone out and placard
They have.
this and has seen it as unfit for human habitation, but yet we're running into more issues, correct?
We have, that's correct. Currently, yesterday I had a staff member go out to their property. They were in the process of cleaning that up. They've set a rollaway dumpster. They had an individual on site that was putting things in there. Staff member advised them that they would need to clean the entire property and then board any unsecured structure, whether it be a door, window, or what have you, on any of the buildings. They agreed that they would have that done. I don't think we've re-inspected it this morning yet, but I plan to visit the property later on today.
And they had a couple units burn as well,
They
correct?
did. They did. The tough thing with apartments is that although when the bottom unit may burn, the top unit may actually be habitable. So it's really difficult to demolish that entire building whenever we have units that are.
But they don't even have running water here.
Right.
Is that right? Okay.
That's what I understand.
Does this
City-
tie our hands with what we can do?
Well, City County Health typically is the entity that'll placard the building. And then I think they rely on the police department to help enforce that placard, keeping the individuals off of the property or maybe out of the structure itself. But as far as code enforcement, we really don't have a mechanism to run people off of the property.
Have we been able to get in touch with the owner?
We have talked with a representative of the owner, from what I can see in the file. I don't know that we've talked with them directly, but the representative has advised that they intend to preserve the property, remove the junk and debris to start with, and then secure the structure, and then start a rehabilitation project.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay. Well, we're back on item H then. With no one else having signed up to speak, we could consider the resolution at H2 declaring that the structures are unsecured except for those previously struck or deferred. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 11I1 is a public hearing regarding the abandoned buildings here listed. Amy, has anyone signed up to speak?
No, they haven't.
They have not, so we will close the public hearing and proceed to 11I2, the resolution declaring that the buildings are abandoned except for item A, which was previously struck. Does the council wish to adopt the resolution? Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 11J1 is a public hearing regarding a resolution approving a substantial amendment to the 2019 Oklahoma City CARES Act amendment, etc. This relates also to the resolution itself, which is at 11J2. But first, I believe we have a presentation.
Yes. So Chris Varga is here with our planning department. Chris is going to just introduce a speaker here. He's going to talk about what's being done here, because several things are occurring here. Some involves additional funding, some involves reallocation of funds. So I'll let Chris introduce this and then introduce our speaker.
Good morning. I'm Chris Varga with the Planning Department, Housing and Community Development Division. And this item before you today is a series of proposed amendments to our HUD documents, our current action plan and consolidated plan, and the last year's action plan and consolidated plan. The amendments include several. I guess the most simplest is to establish an emergency pest inspection treatment program in the amount of $24,000 for our whole house rehab program. That item is just, we've found on inspection of some of our properties that there is infestation that needs to be addressed before any further evaluation can be done. So this is a new program. It's only in the amount of $24,000, but we are asking for that amendment. The second one is to carry forward certain CDBG and home activities that have remaining fund balances at the end of June. This is not allocating any additional monies to those programs, but if they haven't spent out, it would allow them to continue to spend that last year's money until the new contracts are in place with HUD, which is often August, September, occasionally even October. Has caused some of our programs to be in a kind of a dead zone where they're not able to take on new projects. So that's what that is trying to accomplish. We are also proposing amendment to authorize the receipt of home ARP funds from HUD, $8,443,107 in home ARP funds. These funds were recently made available to the city. Home ARP is a different program than HUD has really done before. Typically, the home program is dealing with affordable housing. In this case, home ARP is only to deal with homeless and those at risk of homelessness. It can include some services. It can include housing. The specific details of what we would do with the money have not been determined. And in this particular action would just allow us to accept the money. We'd be allowed to use up to 5% of it for staff salaries and planning activities. And then we need to develop a public allocation plan that would come back before you in terms of what we propose to do with the money. That has to have input from our stakeholders, specifically required to have our Continuum of Care Board and our service providers have input into that plan. So this action today would just accept that money and start that process. That money does not need to be spent till 2030, so we have some time to do some proper evaluation of the best uses. The other amendment that's before us is related to the CARES Act money. This is originally in 2019, we got some CARES CDBG funds. We got a second tranche, if you will, this last September. We have not yet accepted it. We were trying to determine the best uses for it. So this amendment would to authorize the acceptance of an additional $4,151,551 in CDBG CV dollars. So because of the way it has this set up, we have to amend various years' plans to do it, but that's what we're attempting to do here. Our proposal is to award this amount of CARES funds to the Mental Health Association of Oklahoma as a subrecipient facility to manage a project to acquire and rehab the Taylor Ridge Apartments located at 4759 Northwest 36th Street. I do have Greg Shin from the Mental Health Association, has a brief presentation on their organization and their project. Basically, we were looking for an option that could efficiently use our CARES money. That does have to be expended by 2026, so we were looking for a project that's essentially ready to go. And this one comports with some of our objectives to get more affordable housing and housing for our at-risk residents in place. So the proposal today includes a funding agreement for them for the $4.8 million, principally out of the CARES Act CV money, and then a little bit moved out of regular CDBG funds to make them whole. And with that, Greg, you want to come on up here and back and forward is apparently all you need.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Mayor and City Council. Thank you for allowing me to speak before you. I think that you can all see the slides here, and I would just like to give a chance to have an opportunity here to give you an overview of who Mental Health Association Oklahoma is, what we do, what our mission is, and how we can be a real asset in the development of affordable housing here in Oklahoma City. So we have been a nonprofit organization since 1955, operating in the state of Oklahoma. We began in Tulsa. We became a certified nonprofit developer in 2014, and we've been working on affordable housing projects since 1991. We're one of the largest HUD grantees in the state of Oklahoma, using multiple sources through the continuum of care, home investment partnership, CDBG, ESG funds, and so forth, from different municipalities, from Oklahoma Housing Finance Agency, from the City of Oklahoma City, from Tulsa County, and the City of Tulsa. This is an overview of our budget. Our most recent audited financials were $21,130,000 in revenues, and in 2021, our budget will be $23 million. You can see that private funding makes up 39%, and then government grants and contracts are 25%, and our rental income, which is substantial, is 36% of our budget because we manage affordable housing projects. This shows our development timeline here, beginning from 1991, which is a transitional residence, which is still in operation today, which was acquired with HUD funds, and that is currently operated for transitional age youth in Tulsa. We added projects year over year, as you can see here on the timeline, and also in Oklahoma City, we added Frontier Apartments on Northwest 23rd Street. Taylor Ridge is our second proposed acquisition and rehabilitation project here in Oklahoma City. This is a map of our locations across the Tulsa County area. You can see we use what we call a low-density scattered site model for affordable housing. We don't think any one neighborhood or any one block is the location or the neighborhood to try to solve the lack of affordable housing. We think that all neighborhoods are a part of the solution. So we select our locations and invest in neighborhoods across the region. So We have 1,424 units that we own and manage across Tulsa County. And in Oklahoma City, we've used HUD funding and private funding, United Way and other sources to lease and own operated units that we have. We have 123 units right now, including the 32 units at Frontier Apartments on Northwest 23rd Street. But this gives you a map of our scattered site model where we're implementing the same low-density scattered site approach here in Oklahoma City. And the project that you have before you is Taylor Ridge Apartments, which is a project that we were able to put before the City Council today at the request of the Planning Department. We located this project and we're going to invest in it. It's what we would call a Class C property, which is in need of significant capital improvements. And the goal here is to preserve the affordable housing for the people, for the families that live there, maintain the affordability of that housing, and upgrade the infrastructure of the property, the surrounding property, which also allows for additional development on the lot that's adjacent to the property that comes with the sale. And this is an overview of the budget. $2.7 million for the purchase of the property, with the total development cost being $4.8 million. So we're going to buy it for $2.7 million and put an additional $2,071,000 into capital improvements. This comes out to just under $90,000 per unit for the acquisition and rehab combined. In the current market that we're seeing right now, Class C unimproved properties are selling for $90,000 to $100,000 a unit or even more. So this project is really a great deal right now in the current market at $90,000 with the acquisition and the rehabilitation. So I want to bring that point to the attention of the council, because the escalating prices in the housing market are really making this look like a better and better deal right now. So the timeline and meeting the thresholds for the project, working with the Planning Department and Mr. Varga, we completed our project budget and the scope of work. We must have certified that 51% of the residents currently living there are at or below 80% of area median income, which would be 80% would be around $40,000 a year for an individual. That's 80% of AMI here in the city of Oklahoma City. We've completed the independent appraisal. We've done a capital needs assessment with a licensed engineer. Environmental review is almost entirely complete. Mr. Varga is working on Part 58 of environmental review, which will soon be completed. We have control of the site. We have a purchase and sale agreement, which will expire in the middle of February. So we're trying to bring this before and get the funding agreement approved so we can close on the property with the HUD funds for acquisition. So the benefits are preservation of affordable housing, family and neighborhood stabilization, prevention of any additional homelessness by displacement of families that could no longer afford to live there if somebody else bought the property and developed it. And of course, there's the economic impacts of creating jobs in the city. And we know that with multiple economic impact studies that we've done with the Department of Commerce, that $4 is returned for every $1 that's invested in affordable housing in the state of Oklahoma, and that has been replicated multiple times now. So the economic impact of this project will be really substantial. It's in Ward 1. I've reached out to Councilor Carter in advance of this meeting to talk to him about the project. And so just as an overview here, again, I'd be happy to take any questions, but we've been in business since 1955. We operate over 1,600 units of affordable housing in Tulsa and Oklahoma City. We're a certified nonprofit developer. We've been awarded over $30 million in HUD funding over time. Our projects have won awards for historic preservation, and we have a proven track record for this type of project, completing the project on time, within the budget, within compliance, maintaining the affordable housing for many years, reporting to the city for the benefit of the households that live there currently. So that's all I really have right now. A few photos here of some of our projects. And this is in Tulsa, a couple of these here. And so here's our Frontier Apartments in Oklahoma City. It's very nice if you want to take a look at it on Northwest 23rd Street. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Greg,
Thank you.
I have a couple questions for you. Would you mind, well, first, thank you for your work and your organization's work. I'm just curious because, you know, it strikes me once upon a time, developers built these sorts of apartment complexes, right? And that as I've been learning more about you talked about family and neighborhood stabilization, for instance, it strikes me that this type of apartment complex itself does not foster community. The very design of the giant parking spaces, these sorts of things in front of these buildings, it doesn't work. I think of the historic kind of failure of Cabrini Green, for instance, this idea of just building super high up, residents don't see each other, there's no common spaces. And then I think of the housing that Jefferson Park has helped build off of Northwest 29th and Classen, where the homes, it's I think, what is it, maybe 6 or 7, maybe 8 homes, and they're facing each other, and they have porches in this sort of way. It actually fosters and builds community. I'm wondering if you could speak to the design, like in terms of any rehab that you all might be doing, and also if you might be able to, I just spoke what I'm understanding about it, but maybe you have a better understanding of the way design can in fact foster community, because I'm of the belief through the research I've done and what I've learned that the design of these apartment buildings is what allows them to fall into disrepair, decay, crime comes a thing. When there's no community, it's easier for things to go askew. I ask this question because we have many of these sorts of apartment complexes scattered across our city. And I think we need to be very intentional, not just with Taylor here, but really thinking about the rehab of apartment complexes all across the city, because our kids are growing up in these places. My students, my middle school students grow up in these sorts of places. And it just seems like a recipe for disaster, whereas you all seem to be thinking outside the box here.
I appreciate your comments, Councilor Cooper. And really what I'm referring to this period of time right now with some of these available subsidies that have expiration dates on them, like this CDBG CV funding opportunity, this is what I'm calling the pre-MAPS period. Okay, there's development funds right now that we need to take advantage of, and as you know, in the MAPS 4 proposal, affordable housing is a really critical component of that. And it will take these types of projects, affordable housing preservation, maintaining affordability for families, to prevent and end homelessness, to do neighborhood stabilization, projects like this that need to be well managed moving forward, as well as the rehabilitation of the housing authorities, public housing units, that they're going to do 4,000 units within that. We have, I think we're proposing 500 units of permanent supportive housing for homeless and disabled folks. So what I'm trying to say is that it's a multi-pronged approach. It'll take preservation and redevelopment with good on-hands management of properties like this. It'll take adaptive reuse and conversion of other abandoned buildings, and it'll take new construction projects, along with the rehabilitation of those housing authority units that are being proposed. We're trying to propose multiple ways to build sustainable models of affordable housing. So this project will not construct new community centers on the location, but we will have hands-on professional property management, not allowing it to go into dilapidated status or be in disrepair going forward. We intend to use our own property management company to continue to manage this locally with our office here at 400 North Walker. So I see this as a part of, it'll be integrated into what's happening with MAPS 4 going forward. So I really don't think that your concern will be something that we'll be worried about when we come back and take a look at the operation of this project going forward. I appreciate your concerns, though. We don't have any intentions of letting this property go into deferred maintenance years down the road after spending the public money on it.
I appreciate the context. I think my two follow-ups, because you really hit on some major issues, right? My first one is, how are you going to be able to ensure when you talk about the on-site property maintenance, because that's something I've learned more and more is a concern, especially when the property owner's out of state or the property management person's out of state.
That's right, yes.
So I'll just start with that first follow-up. How do you all work to ensure that is something you're able to implement?
Right, so we have our own property management company, which is called East Oak Property Management. We operate it in Tulsa and in Oklahoma City, or we use a third-party property management company that we hire that works locally for us. We do it both ways in Tulsa. Here we use East Oak Property Management. Previously we used Price Edwards, which was another local property management company. So we'll have only licensed professional property managers who will be managing this property for us in Ward 1.
And then my second follow-up is, in terms of the rehab, I'd like to learn more as you all do this work about what that actual rehab work entails, what you're learning, because again, it strikes me that we need to move away from the ways in which these apartments were constructed in the first place, this model, to something that, again, is more community-minded, even if it's not on-site community recreation, right? Just really rethinking the ways in which people would move around that area. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yes, and I would be happy to provide renderings to the council or hold meetings once we get the development plans firmly in place. With the scope of work will be all new roofs, all new windows, the exterior will be completely redone. We're going to do a lot of work on the site, the sidewalks, the landscaping. This place will be transformed when we're done, and it will be the best apartment complex in the neighborhood. I'm very confident of that.
I'll look forward to that, and I'll let my office know and that we need to keep in contact. And
Okay.
I want to know more about how this is some work. I know MAPS 4 is going to be a major part of this, but this strikes me as an issue citywide, and we have places like this all across Ward 2. And I think there's a good chance that this part of what was once Ward 1 is about to become Ward 2. So my eyes are definitely focused on it there. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does that conclude the
That's all we
presentation?
have on that, yes.
Okay, one person has signed up to speak on this item, David Dirkschneider.
I was just speaking in support of it, but I don't need to speak.
Okay, all right, thank you. No one else has signed up to speak, so we'll close the public hearing at 11J1, which brings us to the resolution at 11J2, approving a substantial amendment to the 2019 Oklahoma City CARES Act amendment, et cetera. What does the council wish to do with the resolution? We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes as soon as you are able. Passes unanimously. Okay, 11K is a joint resolution with the Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust adopting the Film Incentive Program as an amendment to Oklahoma City's General Obligation Limited Tax Bonds Program and Policy. And we have a presentation.
Yes, Jeff Seymour with the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce is here with us today to present this program.
Good morning.
Morning.
First, a little background on how we got here to present a film incentive. As many of you know, we have been approached by several large film projects looking at Oklahoma City over the last couple of years, and in conversations with those film projects have really tried to understand what it would look like to build, instead of a one-off film incentive proposal for these projects, what would it look like to build something structural, long-standing in nature, and something that would really look at the hard and fast fiscal benefits to the city in addition to just the overall appeal of having a film project here. And so what we wanted to do is walk through a proposal this morning that really takes into consideration that return on investment to the city in a couple of different buckets, and how we would allocate those funds and administer those funds through a process. So at a very high level, the goal of a local and film incentive project would be to obviously build a bigger film industry locally to complement other primary job growth that we're seeing in the marketplace. Obviously to provide new jobs, provide opportunities for contracting with local businesses, increase the sales of local vendors, and sales tax collections would be the mechanism that we would look at as the primary fiscal impact. The real big picture item here that we're looking at is building a larger local industry base for film, and also providing a mechanism that we can retain film talent here in the market that has to unfortunately leave Oklahoma City to do projects, go to other places, and help them stay here in Oklahoma City and feel comfortable in taking that risk in Oklahoma City versus other markets. We wanted to use a mechanism that mirrors other incentive programs that we have that's pay for performance in nature, with, again, the goal of creating a larger economic sector, not just doing production here, but post-production as well. The team that was assembled to work on this project included the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber, City, Alliance, and then we also relied very heavily on Tony Maston, who used to work at the Oklahoma Tax Commission and worked on a lot of the incentive programs at the state, including primary job incentives, to really understand how to create a tool that had a strong fiscal impact locally and looked hard at ROI. So the proposal we would make is a two-pronged bucket. One is a feature film incentive that would grant up to a 5% expense rebate on qualified expenses for projects greater than $500,000 in qualified expenses, or more than $5 million in qualified expenses. For feature films of $500,000 or more, we would provide a rebate of up to 5% of those qualified expenses back to the project. For feature films with more than $5 million, we could provide up to 10% of qualified expenses back. In a separate bucket, looking at television projects or scripted series projects, slightly different thresholds of $100,000 of qualified expenses to receive up to a 5% rebate, or for projects more than $500,000, a rebate of up to 10%. We'll talk more about the qualifications to receive either 5 or 10% moving forward. So the primary factors to receive more than 5% would be looking primarily at local impact here in the city of Oklahoma City. So filming at Oklahoma City assets or sound stages, filming multiple projects in the cities. We want things that have a long-standing value here for the community. Post-production activities taking place here, hiring local vendors, diverse vendors, and then hiring local residents to participate in the filming process. Go ahead. Again, kind of talked about the two different buckets here. The way to create qualified expenses are to look at those items that would cause the spending of local sales tax in Oklahoma City proper. This could include hotel rooms, restaurant spending, catering spending, car rentals, wages and salaries of certain qualified film members, construction costs that's taxable in the city limits, and other production and post-production cost. Additional eligibility requirements that would be required of any project to receive the incentive at all is that their main production office must be located in the city of Oklahoma City, which is a hard and fast rule. At least 50% of the production days would occur here in the city limits, and that they meet certain guidelines for submitting their application and performance deadlines of when they request rebates back from the city. They would also be required to credit the city of Oklahoma City in their film credits. Much like you see the big Georgia peach on a lot of film projects, we want them to credit the city of Oklahoma City as well to continue to push that Oklahoma City brand. Application process would look a lot like the current strategic investment program incentive. An applicant would work with the chamber and the alliance to put forward a budget, which would include a list of proposed qualified expenses. Based on those list of qualified expenses, we would dictate an amount of rebate that the company could receive, a not to exceed value, bring that to the trust, and then bring that to the city for approval. Again, this would look very similar to the way we currently structure SIP incentives. This is just a slide that kind of talks about, again, that application process. Go ahead. Submission for payment of the incentive. We wanted to look at best practices when we talked about how the rebate process would work. So obviously the company would have to go through a contract process with the city to have a not to exceed amount. Then they would have to, on the backside of performing the project, turn in a list of qualified expenses, which would be audited by a third party, which is a best practice that the state currently uses on their film incentive proposal. Those receipts, those qualified receipts, could be turned into the city then to receive a rebate. The final product, again, they'd have to meet the closure of production process. They would turn in claims and then documents through their auditor to the city, and then would be able to receive payment for those amounts. And again, not to exceed the contract amount provided on the front end of the proposal. Our proposal would be that funding would come from the GOLT bond allocation for economic development that we currently use for strategic investment program funds. And I don't know, City Manager, if you wanted to talk about the amount, but we've proposed an amount, I think, not to exceed $3 million we'd use for these first tranche of funds. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but this is the proposal we've come up with.
Thank you for the presentation and all your work and
Thank you.
everybody who's contributed to this. Any questions, comments?
I have a couple. As we see, looking at diversifying the economy in how it's defined, I see areas that are focused that include excuse me, enterprise zones, tax increment finance districts, and other areas. So I don't see anything specific to minority businesses or minority support as far as this type of industry is concerned. So I'm quite concerned why we don't have those types of principles or just conversations included in this award, payment, or procedure for this type of industry.
Council member, if you look at page 4, slide 4, actually, if you look at that last bullet point for additional add-on factors, I mean, obviously this is a two-tiered program. We want to incent projects, to your point, that have the biggest impact on the largest base of businesses. And one of the factors.
Sorry to interrupt you there. I'm going to stop you because I did read that, but my concern is the fact that it is not labeled as such. It says diverse OKC, but I would like for it to specify, as we're looking at the problems and issues that we had last year and through COVID pertaining to our minority businesses not being supported, this should also reflect the same, especially if we're using GOLT funds, and we use those same GOLT funds to also assist us in being able to start and to help with those same minority businesses. This particular effort could and should be able to do the same thing.
We don't disagree, Ms. Nice. I think what I would say is, yeah, it is, and we kind of stated here, is it is our intent to make sure that the impacts of creating a larger film industry are broad in the community in nature, and that, obviously, as you pointed out so clearly, that the impacts of this translate down to the smallest and minority businesses that have been, to your point, most affected by some of the impacts of the last 24 months. As the mayor talks about and the chamber talks about a lot, and you talk about a lot, ma'am, we're looking at trying to do things that bolster the community as a whole and reach deeper into
We're still waiting for that. I still haven't been able to see from the Alliance, nor from the chamber, city chamber, nor from our city structure in the efforts of what we are looking at, what we're asking for. Because again, focus on projects willing to locate in distressed areas. These distressed areas are in minority communities, but these minority communities are not being able to reap the benefits of these said industries. This is an issue. If we're going to use GOLT funding to fund these types of efforts, it needs to be defined, it needs to be said, and it needs to be in a way that it also implores that we are supporting those minority businesses in this industry as well. And I see none of that being defined in anything that I am reading.
Ma'am, I take your comments into strong consideration. I will tell you it's the full intent of both the Chamber and our partners to do everything we can to support minority businesses, and I think we've shown that support over the last 2.5 years. But your comments are very well taken, and we definitely would want to look at that and make sure that we strongly point out that this is a high priority for this program and other programs. I mean, ma'am, I would strongly point out that if you look at the way we administer the small business continuity program, a lot of that had a focus on
I don't think we
minority
should even
businesses,
start
but-
there on that conversation.
Well-
But I would like to see if there's a way for us to add this language, since this is a resolution. Should be some language included in this conversation to add such for this effort. We have downtown parking incentive program, we have infrastructure program, we have all of these other things, affordable housing program. But again, if we aren't being able to help ensure that our most vulnerable that can also reap incentives and benefits are being protected or served, what are we doing this for?
Ma'am, I'll just kind of reiterate that, again, this is to look at creating a new industry that impacts the
I
entire
understand what
community.
this is, because I also know some of those great minority folks who are doing this work and who have been doing this work without being able to get these incentives, and who have been wanting to figure out how they can bolster their business or even their studio or expand in the ways that they can, and they haven't been able to do that because they don't have the capacity and they don't have the support that they need in order for them to get where they need to go. So these things in this particular conversation with GOLD funding can help us to get in that direction.
I would just continue to concur with your comment that it is our intent to be holistic in our approach. And also, one thing that I should note here is this also is running in complement to creating additional structure to support a broader base of film industry locally that reaches deep into the community, that reaches into our schools, reaches into the creating talent and
that's
talent
what
pipelines.
that's what we all want.
Ma'am.
And that's and to this, and then I'll be done and you can finish.
Yeah.
I'll say we all want that. But at the same time, we still have to work through protecting those businesses that have been at the disadvantage, including and especially those businesses that are part of the film industry that have also reached out to my office that I talk to often, who have been at a disadvantage and can't be able to be a part of these types of processes or programs. So if we're not including them in these types of conversations in the beginning, and then we want to come back and decide, oh yes, we forgot about this, let's try to figure out how we can do it now, that's going to be an issue. It has been an issue because we've been left behind in that process already. So I'm trying to understand with GOLD funding in this GOLD process, why we are unable to at least add another type of incentive program that defines how we are working with those minority businesses or minority filmmakers to ensure that as a city, we are protecting their best interests and wanting to promote what they are doing in our city as a whole.
If you don't mind me saying, sir and ma'am, I think the current structure that's being proposed is to reward those businesses that would work with minority suppliers, and that they would be rewarded to bolster the amount that they could receive by reaching deep in the community. If that's not your intent, we'd obviously have to look at different language, but that is the way we've structured it as currently, so.
And that's not what I asked.
Do you feel like the language that we have in here in the resolution actually specifically addresses that?
When I look at, again, that page 4, and I don't have the copy of the resolution in front of me, if there's something that we need to do to bolster that, I would support that. To be candid to Councilman Nice's point, I will tell you it is our, Councilwoman Nice's point, it is our full intent that this has an impact, including in diverse businesses,
Sure.
and that was the language we crafted. If we need to re-examine that language, to Councilwoman Nice's point, I'd be happy to do so.
I would like to relook at this language because there are some concerns that I have pertaining to how we are defining different businesses and how it's going to be determined as we look at the programming and programs that have to be defined in this particular GOLD funding. And if we don't address those things now, it's going to be very difficult for us to do those things in the future. That's just how I see this. as we're looking at what we need to do from the beginning of this. And this is not something that I'm just bringing up now. This is not a new conversation. So I know everyone that I have talked about this with understands that this has been something that I've asked for as far as how are we ensuring that we work through the process of those other businesses or disadvantaged businesses, because I'm not just talking about, and everybody think, oh, she's the black woman, so she's talking about black businesses. No, we're talking about disadvantaged and minority businesses. We have a lot of Asian district businesses. We have a lot of Hispanic district businesses. We have a lot of different businesses from all across different walks of life and cultures that need to be represented just as much as African American businesses. And that should be defined in this GALT application and resolution that I do not see as far as a number that's listed in a program or requirements.
So that you're wanting an amendment that would acknowledge that we would have efforts to reach out to minority and disadvantaged businesses. Is that what you're asking for?
I'm not asking for not just for that, but for us to create whatever the conversation needs to be to ensure that that happens. Because I see as far as affordable housing program due to rising costs of dwindling inventory of quality, and that's on page 12, we have that clearly defined of what that looks like. So there should be a clear definition of the program of what it looks like for incentivizing minority businesses, what that looks like for even if it does entail contracting, which that's not what I was talking about, but being able to support even those filmmakers in this industry as well.
So specific to the film incentive program, to emphasize that we are going to pursue or recruit minority and disadvantaged businesses.
All right, ma'am, are you saying filmmakers themselves to specifically have a carve out? Is that what you're saying, ma'am?
I'm not going to fully say that. I think there could be different caveats to that. And I think clearly, because I'm not going to immediately just say off the cusp, I need to do some research on that to understand what some others have done in order to define what that looks like. So I'm not going to say yes or no today. But I would like for us to take at least one more meeting to look at how we can address that issue and add that information into this particular request for us to move forward. And I don't think that's something that's out of line to do, because clearly we want businesses to be a part of this industry. We want to make sure we're incentivizing these industries. And I have 2 of these particular film production studios that sit within my ward. One in downtown Oklahoma City, one in far northeast Oklahoma City that sits in a predominantly African American community, or a very diverse community as it is listed here. So for that to be said, there are some things that we do need to work through as far as how we define it, what we look at, and how we move forward with awarding these types of incentives to make sure everyone is captured. I don't want anyone to be left out. That's what my purpose in me speaking up about this is. So therefore, I would ask that we can just defer this for 2 weeks. Let's look at what that language could be, and let's just see how we can add that in there and move forward in that light.
City manager, is this on?
Yes, we hear you.
Thank you. As I noted to you just a little earlier, I think the clause where it's the second to last whereas clause.
In the resolution?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Where it talks about whereas the production of
Right.
films. Yeah. I think that's the clause where we.
Where are you, James? I've lost.
Oh, you're fine.
Sorry, I
you're
didn't mean
fine.
to interrupt.
So you're okay. You know where it says, now therefore be it resolved?
Yes.
Go one clause up from there and go one more up, Councilman.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I think right in there is the potential for language about
What page?
Historically, and I mean, we can play with this language, but I think the language is something along the lines of historically disadvantaged, marginalized minority communities. But I think this is the clause, because this is the clause talking about connecting with vendors This is the clause about the productions themselves, right? And so I think looking at this particular, Jeff, do you see where I'm at?
No, I don't. Say again.
So it's
on page 2 of 3.
It's the second to the last whereas clause before it goes into the now therefore.
And that's not really
resolved.
what I was talking about, but that's,
Where were you thinking, Councilwoman?
no.
Yeah.
I would like it to be also defined within what this definition and all these guiding principles are too, as far as the background and conversation of what we're looking at.
I'm sorry, Mr. Washington, I couldn't
Mr.
hear the
Washington,
Councilwoman.
please. You've signed up to speak. We'll get to you in a minute.
Sorry, Councilwoman, I couldn't hear you. You talked about the definition part.
That's fine, just go ahead.
So at least there, and I do think, yeah, Jeff, did you find where we were?
Yeah, I did down. Thank you.
That's at least one place where I see the potential for adding that, adding language about ensuring that the vendors, the sales to vendors, the idea of providing jobs to residents. I think that there, at least in this whereas clause, needs to be a highlight that we're talking about, of course, all productions, but there has, I mean, I'm about to teach my very first black cinema class at OCU, and I don't think that's been taught there before. So there has historically not been an emphasis on these. I mean, there's actually been literal language in Hollywood, the production code, that wrote LGBT people out, prohibited them from being in these films, from showing black and white people in a relationship together. That was literal prohibitions in Hollywood, right? So when I think of making sure that productions exist that have either people working behind the camera or in front of the camera from those historically disadvantaged communities, these communities have been left out of representation in Hollywood, either in terms of representation or the jobs themselves. I think it is worth our time to be intentional when we name these communities in terms of making sure they have access to the productions themselves and that they're also in front of the screen. Do you follow what I'm saying? So
I follow what you're saying.
I'm not sure how to write it in.
Yeah, I follow what you're saying, especially with the fact that, the Alliance didn't have a problem adding urban renewal and different things in here. So clearly we should be able to name and add those communities that are being impacted as well.
I would say, City Manager Freeman, it is our full intent that this would be impactful on diverse talent, diverse vendors, and diverse projects. And so if we need to look at that language, I would be very supportive of that.
Okay.
So I've asked that we defer this for 2 weeks. I would like to look at this language because I do think it's important, and I hope that you, as the rest of this council, see it as important as well for us to review this and look at it a little further to ensure that we're capturing all of Oklahoma City and not just some.
Okay, so I concur with the councilwoman that this type of language is probably going to take time to draft. I don't think we can do this on the fly today. So she has a motion that she'd like to make to defer this 2 weeks. Yes, Councilman Greenwood.
Yes, just since we're going to be looking at issues, who is proposed to pay for the audit?
The way we would propose it would that the film project would have to pay their own audit, basically. They'd have to pay for the services of the CPA to do their audit, and that would not be incurred by the city of Oklahoma City.
Good. I would suggest that the city engages the auditor, but that they be reimbursed for those costs by the recipient of the incentives.
I think that we would definitely want that. And there's certain auditors that the state currently uses, including here in Oklahoma City, that do that same process for the state, and we'd want to have the same process in place for our program as well.
And that's what we do in our treasury program for like sales tax audits. Exactly right.
Yeah, we would not.
Now, here's some, they're going to sound like criticism, so I might as well just be honest with you. Often these programs, and I'm not talking particularly about film incentives, but any kind of economic development incentive, part of the goal is to increase employment, and we're basically at full employment now.
Yeah.
There's one estimate that I saw recently where we've got more than 20,000 jobs unfulfilled. Now they range from like warehouse positions at $20 an hour plus benefits up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. So the issue about increase in employment is not a concern for our community at this time. And I would suggest for the Economic Development Trust to look at some type of incentive to help businesses attract employees, and it probably means from out of state, to fulfill the outstanding positions. The other concern I have is of the 4 most recent peer reviews on this issue, none of them were able to conclude that the community offering the incentive received a net economic benefit from it. At best, it was a wash. And that includes locations like Louisiana and New Mexico, the 2 locations with the longest standing film incentives in place, yet neither one can demonstrate a net economic benefit from film incentives, which leads you to the question, well, who's benefiting from it? And obviously it's the owners of the businesses who receive the incentives are the ones who can only be assured of receiving a benefit and not the community. And then finally, I see this in some ways pitting Oklahoma City against other communities in Oklahoma, and without question, we have benefited the past 2 years in such a position that we currently have historic reserves. We fared so much better than any other community in Oklahoma, and it's a situation where the rich get richer in terms of being able to attract businesses because of the resources we have. Those just add up and tell me, for example, that now's not the time to be offering this incentive. So that's just my opinion. I'm not trying to persuade anybody, but I did want to share these concerns. And I do appreciate you already looking into the audit issues, because I think that's an important aspect. There are studies that have shown, unfortunately, like with any government program, fraud being included in some of these plans.
If you don't mind,
Yeah.
sir, I think you make great points, and that was part of the conversation on all three of your points that we looked at here. On the first, to the point of what we're trying to build here is a new industry to continue to diversify the overall economy. As you know, we have a very diverse economy, but a lot of the economic growth we'd like to continue to push would be around things that are innovative, have digital arts, and are the creative arts. And this is definitely a push in that direction. I mentioned earlier that this is not just production, but post-production that we're also trying to create. That's a complement there as well. And you mentioned some of the state programs that have not been able to produce a fiscal impact, and we agree with that. One of the considerations here was looking hard and fast at the return on investment from a fiscal impact point to the city. Hence the reason we're using a qualified expense rebate, so we don't get in that position where we're overextending our ROI. So I definitely agree with you, sir.
And I think, too, it's that idea of trying to look long-term, that, we may have full employment right now, but making sure that we're looking long-term. And we'd like to build this industry in the state, or in the state. Yeah. They'd like to build it overall. We'd like to build it within the city.
Yeah, and to your point, too, about the other cities, we do know there are other cities that have created programs. The state has a program, but they don't necessarily have to market Oklahoma City. We're all, to your point, we are competing with other cities, but what's been kind of unique about this program is the support we've already received from cities like Guthrie, who see film projects landing in Oklahoma City also benefiting the region. And so it's been neat to see kind of that cluster develop as we also think about standing up, but your point's well taken.
I'm sorry, you were going to say something, Councilman? May I also add something? So, Councilman Greenwell, I don't know that it will surprise you when I say this. You and I agree really strongly on your final 2 points. As someone who loves film, teaches it, loves listening to people talk about it, I'm very aware of those peer-reviewed articles about these incentives. And Councilman Greenwell's exactly right. Very often these incentives are making these multinational companies, remember, only 6 companies now, it may even be 5, own the overwhelming majority of our media. That should scare everybody. It scares me. I don't like it. I do not like that. And it's why I worry about, it's why making sure that the language we put in this resolution in terms of the communities that we spoke of earlier. It's why it's important, because what's happened, and you heard someone no less than a film giant than Martin Scorsese say this a couple years ago in the New York Times, when he warned us that our movie theaters right now are full of sameness. When we go into a movie theater right now, think about it. It's franchises. In other words, movies you know before. It's Marvel. It's sequels and it's remakes. But in a lot of ways, it's just a repeat of the Odyssey story over and over and over and over again. Person goes on a journey, encounters obstacles, comes out a better person. It's that sameness that I would say we as a city need to overcome. And I'm encouraged, talking with Jeff, talking with Prairie Serve, talking with Metro Tech, I think the only way we're going to overcome that sameness is through education with our students. We have to teach our students how to become what they call below the line people, the camera operators, the sound technicians. They have to learn how to be the production folk, so that when a company comes here to make a movie, they can hire our people because they're skilled and ready to be hired. That's first thing. Second thing is that as they develop those skills, they can become the storytellers themselves. Think of conservatism in this way. Think of how many times conservatives have said, and they are right on this, that the media on the West and East Coast ignores the middle part of our country. They are right on that note. How often have you ever seen a story on TV or film about South Oklahoma City? About Spencer, right? You don't, and we should. Those are stories worth telling. The reason we don't tell them is because we have not prioritized the media literacy of our students to make sure that they can tell their stories, whether it's the story of the fact that their parent is someone from Poland years ago, or someone from England, or someone from a Native American history, Black history, LGBT history. We haven't told those stories because we have not, in our K through 12 education, taught our students how to tell them. We haven't even given them the tools to do so. We never even told them they could. That's what we need to meet in this moment. It cannot just be about giving an incentive to a big multinational corporation. They have enough, and they pit cities against each other, as Councilman Greenwell has said. So I'm imploring this council to really think about, in this language here, how we can ensure we are being intentional about the education of our students in terms of being able to not just be the production crew, but the storytellers. Because if we do that, we can create a film culture here that makes us unique. We're not just repeating the stories. We are telling uniquely Oklahoma City stories. And then that will contribute to economic growth. And it's that order. It's about avoiding sameness. It's about the education of our students, making them not just the skill set for the crew, but the storytellers who create culture, honor our local culture, and then contribute to our economy. Those are the 5 things that we need to be doing. Otherwise, Councilman Greenwell is exactly right, and we're just giving money to big corporations who have no stake in our people. They have stake only in the accumulation of more money. So that's how I see it. So I look forward to working with you all in this language. And Jeff, I do want to say, I appreciate you all taking time to craft this, because I see the potential.
The conversation, we really do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion to defer this item 2 weeks. Let's see if there's a second. We have a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, item is deferred. Having said that, I did promise Mr. Washington he could speak on it since he had signed up. Mr. Washington, for 3 minutes.
Well, sir. You've all heard him today. Really? What in the world are we going to discuss after hearing this malarkey this morning? This man had already told you that his intent with his company is to target revenues of a giant nature. To hell with the black community, anybody else that don't have money. I'm not going to talk nice. Anytime I hear a racist motivation going on, I'm going to tell you exactly and respond exactly in kind. Now then, You spoke about Mr. Councilman Cooper, about culture. The man then told you he wouldn't talk about no culture other than his own, because we don't have enough money to have him to incentivize our own culture. Come on, man. Now, hell, I'm going to be nice to hearing this crap like this here. Now he wants you to do a resolution to let y'all equalize and become a partner with this Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust, who in and of itself should have seen and discovered this racist motive activity, modus operandi, and yet they have employed these people still, and then they want y'all to give them some of this gulf funding as well to further increase the big buckets of the big pockets of those who come into our towns and say, okay, now let's take all the damn money and let them come up with some other idea now to come up and get their monies back. Oh, no, 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 no. And then he's going to come talking about, well, we'll put people in the industry that we want them to help target the minority communities, somebody don't maybe work with them. Oh, no, man, no, no, no. You have messed up with me, sir. I don't even know you, sir, and it's not personal per se. But you have to target our downtrodden communities as well, sir. This is not your money. This is not the state or city's money. It's the taxpayers' money. You can't discriminate on the distribution of funds. Don't we all know this? You can't come up and say, okay, hold up, I'm going to exclude them, but I'm going to use your taxpayer dollars to do this. I mean, where's he from? Is he from Oklahoma or any state of the union? Really now? Huh. Isn't that something? Projects, really? I tell you what, we need an outside agency, a third party like myself, and you better believe, boy, if I monitor it, I'll bring some states' hardcore facts back to you. This, as a matter of fact, how are they engaging with the Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust? It has to be somebody already have a premature design and accepting, because these people cannot become a part of economic development without an understanding sitting down. So it has to be somebody already is understood. Go ahead and do what you're going to do, Bob. I'll come here to support you today, Bob, because we're going to keep the money in our own circle.
30 seconds remaining.
I'm sorry?
30 seconds.
Okay. She already told you she's got filming industries in her district, her ward. But he said, oh, no, I don't care about that over there. Y'all can't bring anything to me. You're the wrong color. That's right. You're the wrong color. That's what I said, and I'm going to say it again. You're the wrong color. I'm not going to bite my tongue. As a matter of fact, sir, I'm going to investigate what y'all stand for. You know, when Michael Washington talk like, I'm like, yeah, if Hutton people listen. Bottom line, I'll be back.
Item L1 is a resolution authorizing the municipal councilor to confess judgment without admitted liability in the case of Daniels v. City of OKC. Executive session is not requested. Yeah, we voted to defer. So we're on L1. We've got a motion and a second. Passes unanimously. Item M1 is a resolution authorizing the municipal council to confess judgment without admitted liability in the District Court of the State of Oklahoma in the case of Edwards v. City of OKC. Executive session is not requested. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item N1 is a resolution authorizing the municipal council to confess judgment without admitting liability in the United States District Court for the Western District of Oklahoma case of Sanders v. City of Oklahoma City. Executive session is not requested. Motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, item 11O is one is claims recommended for approval. Executive session is not requested. We can handle both claims, A and B, with one motion. Have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, item 12 is comments from council. Ward 1.
Thank you, Mayor. I just would like to basically bring the extra awareness to the cold weather that we're having right now. Taking care of our extra citizens. You know, we've got some record cold that we just experienced this past weekend. We've got some new ones coming up, and we have people who aren't aware of what's going on. I was able to find a gentleman this weekend who was frozen half to death, and we had some issues with our shelters. But I wanted to give a shout out to our city staff and everything that they did to ensure that these doors got open and that these people were receiving care, especially to our Oklahoma City police officers who showed up, and especially to our Deputy Chief of IMSA, Chris Jenkins, and his crew that were out there on Saturday on a holiday in -3-degree wind chill weather, covering people with blankets, handing out hand warmers, making sure that everybody was receiving as much care as they possibly could. It's crazy to see that sometimes we get real warm in our house and we can forget that there are people that aren't. So if you see someone in a tent, if you see someone walking down the street, please offer some assistance. Thank you.
Thank you. Ward 2?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Oh, New Year's resolution? Ward 4?
It's going to be a
No,
very
don't mess it up.
unpredictable year.
Ward 7.
Yes, I just wanted to make mention about the Mlk Parade. I know we heard about what's happening, but please mark your calendars for the 17th of January. The parade will begin at 2 p.m. I know there is a breakfast that happens early in the morning, and from there, the events start about 9 a.m. There's also going to be a job fair, a silent march from 23rd down 23rd Street to the History Center, and a program that will also convene at the church where we will lead off the parade. And I understand this year there is also an essay contest, and in addition, there's going to be an award ceremony right after the parade. So I'm looking forward to being a participant of the award ceremony, and also seeing and gathering safely for us. And I just want to also just tell everyone right now to continue to social distance, wash your hands, and let's continue to take care of each other, because these numbers are rising and they have no regard for who you are. This variant is not something to play lightly with, so please take care of yourselves. That's all I have.
Thank you. And we have one citizen who signed up to speak under item 13, Michael Washington.
Yes, everyone. Now that I've been able to regain my oxygen, maybe I can be just a bit more calmer for you this afternoon, or this morning, rather. Now then, speaking here briefly, first of all, I want to give honor to the Most High Supreme Being for finding favor in allowing me to branch over into a new year that I've never seen before, 2022. And welcome to all of you for being able to make it on that side with me. Now then, and while it is a new year, the same depressing, deadly, and agonizing realities accompany us over to the other side. Having said that, I have started a tradition of turning my back to the committee in the Oklahoma County Criminal Justice Authority, but I said this is a brand new start. Possibly, maybe they'll start listening with tentative ears. Let's see. My voice will be heard, and the voice of the people will be heard. Whether you like it or not, we will get our point across. For 11 consecutive months, my organization, Oklahoma Coalition Against People Abuse, where our motto is change your world and your world will change around you, we have demonstrated out in front of the Oklahoma County Detention Center, vehemently expressing our righteous indignation about this atrocities being visited upon the people that they confine in these wretched conditions. Now then, let me further say that due to our reasonable efforts, changes are being made to the facility, but not quick enough for us, and we will not compromise by any means necessary by the ballot of the bullet. Now then, let me understand too that these unconstitutional, horrible, deplorable conditions that visit upon our detainees daily must be stopped immediately. The conditions have declined in some areas, but improved in others, but insignificantly so. But let me say before my time expires, we will not and we will always oppose building a new $300 million facility. Why? Because your intent is not to decrease the inmate population, it's to increase it now, especially with a $300 million state-of-the-art facility. Really now? Now, the current one holds 1,200, and it costs $52 million. Now, just think how that's going to look. Maybe, 2,000 detainees, and guess what? They're already illegally housing 3 to 4 inmates to a cell already. So now you're going to be able to house more than that when you get larger. Why? Because there are things right there in our communities today that's incentivizing. I like to use that word. I stole that from y'all today. Incentivizing. Let's make people come in. How can we support our facility if we
30
don't have enough
seconds
people coming in
remaining.
off the street? Watch this. Not only that, but if you take that money and spend it in the medical field, for mental illnesses, it's really definitely needed. Things would be much more better for the community. And horseshoe, boy, this time gets me, but thank y'all very much.
That concludes our business. We're at item 14, adjournment, and we are adjourned.
Who did I get a copy? Let me get a copy. Who got a copy resolution? Who got extra? Let me have them.